No jersey, no glasses, no hat, no notes, flying by the seat of my pants. Haven't even brushed my hair or brushed my teeth. I'm willing to try anything at this point. What's happening, everybody? Justin, Bridgewater's Finest on YouTube, Blockbuster_guy on Twitter, and if you're still following my Stanley Cup predictions, you're a trooper, because I've been terrible these last few rounds. Again, it's uncharted territory for me. I've never had this kind of a cold streak, right? I've gone 6 straight series now picking the wrong team that was going to win the series. It's an unprecedented streak for me. I guess there's nowhere to go but up. I keep saying that, but you know what? I could actually get this one wrong, and I'm still going down. Your Stanley Cup final is set. Your Eastern Conference champion, Washington Capitals, taking on your Western Conference champion. Seriously, who let Gerard Gallant and the Vegas Golden Knights play franchise mode on easy? The Vegas Golden Knights are your Western Conference champions. How? What is this sport even? No, you know what? Moratorium on that. Let's get that conversation. Let's stop having that conversation. Because not only do I feel like that's probably fuel in the Golden Knights locker room, but honestly, it's kind of derogatory towards what they did in building that team and building the least callable Stanley Cup contender ever, I think. Rather than, oh my God, how did this happen? Oh, this is so embarrassing for the NHL. It's not embarrassing for the NHL. It's like the best case scenario for the NHL. Do you have any idea how healthy that franchise is? How much money that franchise has immediately just been thrown right into it? Yeah, it probably stunts the franchise's growth a little bit, that it didn't do what expansion teams are supposed to do and suck for 4 or 5 years, and then get great prospects, great draft pick positioning, and then sort of build from within, which they said that was the plan all along. But I mean, look, are you going to look a Stanley Cup Finals berth in the mouth? I don't think so. So make no mistake about it, the Vegas Golden Knights in the Stanley Cup Final are the best case scenario for the NHL and for that franchise, certainly from a financial perspective. How many fans who didn't think they were going to be fans of the Golden Knights are now huge fans of the Golden Knights? There's a ton of them. They're going to have no problem selling tickets for years to come, regardless of whether they win the Cup this year or not. So, as per decree from Bridgewater's Finest, moratorium on that whole, oh my God, how did this happen with the Vegas Golden Knights? It happened because they were smart. Very clearly smarter than the rest of us. Okay, so Caps and Golden Knights, that's our Stanley Cup final. Again, probably the least predictable Stanley Cup final you could possibly think of. But the more that I kind of thought about this series, and again, I have no notes here. I'm totally just flying off the top of my head. When I started thinking about this series, I was like, I predicted the least interesting scenario for the Stanley Cup final. If you'll remember, I predicted Winnipeg and Tampa Bay. Now look, Winnipeg, there would have been plenty of an interesting story there. A Canadian team back in the Stanley Cup final, trying to win the Cup for the first time since 1993. My Montreal Canadiens, they remain the last Canadian team to win the Cup. But there's plenty of interest there. But with Tampa Bay, and I'm not talking about fan interest. I'm talking about the storyline. I'm a child of the movies. I always think of the storyline element of it. But like Tampa Bay, they're the story of an overdog. They're the story of the favorite, and the favorite making it to the championship is kind of it's kind of a boring story. I mean, you have Steven Stamkos, who's one of one of the best players in the league, certainly right now, but in the league in the modern era that doesn't have a Stanley Cup. So, I mean, that would have been interesting on that element for Stamkos to be there. But it's nowhere on the level of the Vegas Golden Knights and the Washington Capitals. We've talked about Vegas and obviously how unpredictable it was that Vegas was here, but you talk about the Washington Capitals, perennially a favorite that just couldn't get over that hump. And you talk about Alex Ovechkin. Look, everybody says Alex Ovechkin is the greatest goal scorer of his generation, and they're all right. I'm going to take it a step further. Alex Ovechkin is arguably the greatest goal scorer in NHL history that has never been to a Stanley Cup final. So now we get to see that story. Now he does get to go to a Stanley Cup final, and that is, again, a tremendous story. So luckily, the most interesting story won out for the Stanley Cup final. I think it's going to make for a great series. I think it's going to make for a ton of viewership, which is good for the NHL, good for the sport, but who's going to win? The last thing that Vegas Golden Knights fans want right now is for me to start cheering for their team. One could say the same thing to the Washington Capitals because I didn't have them getting past Pittsburgh. It's also incredible to me that the Caps went from being down 2-0 in the first round and looking like they were going to be another disappointing early exit to now being in the Stanley Cup final. That's pretty incredible. And again, where I have no notes, I have no statistics, I have nothing that I'm going on. I'm just going on this. Top end talent, Washington has the edge. Speed, Vegas has the edge. Defense, honestly, I think Vegas has the edge. Goaltending, you almost have to say that Vegas has the edge because, I mean, Fleury's going to win the Conn Smythe. It's that conversation is ridiculous. Whether they win or lose, Fleury's going to win the Conn Smythe. The whole debate is ridiculous. That award has been wrapped up. So you almost have to say that Vegas has the edge. But then, like, Braden Holtby shut out Tampa Bay in back-to-back games to make it to the Cup final. So I'm actually going to say goaltending is a wash. Coaching, I have to give the slight edge to the Washington Capitals. I think just on track record, which, don't get me wrong, is to take nothing away from what the Vegas Golden Knights have done as an entire staff from top to bottom, taking nothing away from them. It's a very slight edge, but I'm going to give it to Washington. Am I allowed to pick both? It's funny, I had a guy on a previous video say, like, well, why are you so upset that you don't, that you got some series wrong? It's really hard to pick who wins the series. You must be new here. It's not that I'm incredible. I do have a pretty good track record picking game winners and series winners and stuff like that. My track record is pretty good. You can go back and check it, but it's because I kind of take pride in doing this, and I kind of take pride in coming to correct conclusions based on my interpretation of the sport and the teams and how I think series are going to go. I kind of take pride in what I do, so that's why it's a big deal. Okay, all right. Official prediction. Bridgewater's Finest selects your 2018 Stanley Cup champions, the Washington Capitals. But they're going to have to earn it in a 7-game series. I think they're going to split the first 4. I think each team is going to take a game on the road. Game 5, I'm going to give Game 5 to Washington. Game 6, I'm going to give it to the Vegas Golden Knights. Send this thing to Game 7. And in Game 7, the Caps take it. Let's send it to overtime, too. Let's just make it that much more fun. Folks, it's going to be a Stanley Cup final for the ages. I know I'll be watching. It kicks off tomorrow. I hope you will be, too. That's it for me. Justin, Bridgewater's Finest on YouTube, Blockbuster_guy on Twitter. Let's hope I can grab just some small semblance of respectability back by picking the Cup finalist correctly, the Cup champion correctly. And hey, we'll see you for a couple more mock drafts that should be coming out within the next week or two.